an exam. We're not grading Ukraine's counteroffensive and saying, you did well based on what we gave you, or you did poorly. What we want to do is support Ukraine to make as much progress as possible on the battlefield so that it is in the strongest possible position at the negotiating table. And we do believe that this counteroffensive will allow Ukraine to take strategically significant territory back from Russia, areas occupied by Russia that are rightfully sovereign Ukrainian territory.
This is my video update from Limassol, Cyprus, on this Monday afternoon. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with the big offensive. It looks like the big counteroffensive, or some big counteroffensive, is underway. I don't know if we can call it the big summer, fall, winter, spring offensive, but something big took place yesterday in the Zaporozhye region, and I'm actually getting reports now that the Ukraine military has launched various attacks in various regions. South Donetsk, Avdiivka. We had the attack yesterday towards Zaporozhye. So something big is happening. Is this the big one? Maybe this is the big one. Maybe this is like the pre-big one or something like that. One thing's for sure, this was not some sort of reconnaissance operation or probing activity or anything like that. There were just too many Ukrainian forces and tanks and vehicles involved for this to be some sort of reconnaissance mission. This is something much bigger than that. And right after Jake Sullivan gave the interview to CNN, where he said that he's expecting this offensive to be very successful, we got the beginnings of something that resembles the big counteroffensive, or could be called the big spring-summer counteroffensive. Now, why is this not being talked about in the collective West media? Why is the Zelensky regime not coming out and saying that they have started the big offensive? I believe they're not saying anything because the offensive got repelled. That's why it did not deliver the results that they were hoping for. If the offensive managed to break through the second and third defensive lines of the Russian military towards Zaporozhye, because that's where it looks like the big push was being made yesterday, well, then the Zelensky regime, Podolyak, Sullivan, Blinken, Nuland, everyone would have come out. Ursula von der Crazy, they all would have come out and they would have said, the big offensive has started. Russia is in tatters. You could put money on it that if the Ukraine military made a significant advance in the Zaporozhye direction, this would be all over the collective West media. So I think for now, they're not saying anything, or they're downplaying it because it was repelled by the Russian military, and repelled fairly quickly, it seems, because like 8 to 10 hours after this advance towards Zaporozhye was made, the Russian Ministry of Defense, they came out with a statement and they said that they had repelled this operation. And you usually don't get the Ministry of Defense issuing statements so quickly. They usually take about 24 hours to issue a statement as to what is going on with these types of attacks. But in this instance, they came out with a statement fairly quickly. The Russian Ministry of Defense, they said that the Ukraine assault began on Sunday morning. The enemy's goal was to breach our defenses in what they assumed was the most vulnerable section of the front line. The enemy has failed to reach its goals and was unsuccessful. The Ministry of Defense said that Ukraine had deployed the 23rd and 31st Mechanized Brigade from its strategic reserves, which were supported in battle by other units. The Ukrainian armed forces have lost more than 250 service members, 16 tanks, 3 infantry vehicles, and 21 armored vehicles, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. So 250 servicemen is the number of soldiers that were lost in this offensive just towards Zaporozhye, and 16 tanks. Now, Ukraine, for the last, let's say, 3 months, give or take, they have been begging the collective West, lobbying the collective West very, very hard to get tanks, to get those Leopard tanks. And they managed to get around, say, 250 to 300 tanks from the collective West. And within a matter of a couple of hours, they lost 16 of those tanks. What's going to happen when Ukraine actually decides to move this offensive forward for not for a few hours, but for a couple of weeks? How many tanks are they going to lose when things really start revving up? From what I understand, the Russians they used their air superiority as well, and they knocked out all the vehicles and all the tanks, and it was just a failure. It was just a complete failure on all levels. But Ukraine continues to go on the attack, and the Russian military continues to repel those attacks. So we definitely have something that resembles an offensive, a big spring-summer offensive, or something along the lines of a pre-big summer offensive. But it's my opinion that the Ukraine military and the Zelensky regime, the collective West media, they're holding back on saying this is the big one until they achieve some sort of breakthrough or some sort of success. In Zaporozhye, they were aiming to get to the Sea of Azov. That's what they were aiming to accomplish, which would make a good media story for the collective West. The Ukraine military reaches the Sea of Azov. It reminds me of the time that the Ukraine military, they reached the border with Russia and Kharkov, and they planted that border post, and the collective West media, they were just going crazy. They were so happy that Ukraine managed to put a border post in Kharkov with the border with Russia. And it was just a huge story. Everyone was talking about it. I think they kind of want to repeat that instance. But anyway, this is what's going on with the big offensive, or the big pre-offensive. I guess we can call it the big pre-summer offensive. We'll see how things go. As I said, Ukraine continues to launch various attacks in various directions, and the Russians have repelled all those attacks. And also keep in mind that the Russians are also on the move as well, and on the move, successfully on the move. And they are advancing in Avdiivka as well as Mariinka, which is the big advance for the Russian military, along with the Chechen forces. The Russians have gotten the order. The Russian military has received the order. Kadyrov has gotten the order to take Mariinka, and the Russians appear to be doing just that. Now, we also have the situation in Belgorod, which is happening at the same time that all this activity in the south, as well as Donetsk, is taking place. I actually read, I think it was I don't know if it was a tweet or a blog post. Anyway, I read something on Twitter or Telegram or Substack, which claimed that the Belgorod is now getting shelled more often than Donetsk. And yesterday was a pretty wild day in Belgorod. You had some Ukraine forces, which the collective West claims are Russian, far-right, anti-Russian militia. That's what the collective West is running with, which is absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, that's what they claim these forces are. Anyway, these I'm going to say they're Ukrainian forces because that's what they are. Let's not kid ourselves. These are Ukrainian forces, and they're under the orders of the Ukraine military and NATO and the collective West. Anyway, they made another incursion into Belgorod. This time, not only with Ukrainian forces, but also with Polish mercenaries. They actually put out a video. There were a lot of fake videos that were put up, by the way, from everything that happened in Belgorod, but one video looks legit, and it was Polish mercenaries kind of bragging, gloating about attacking Russia and fighting the Russians inside of Russia in the direction of Belgorod and the Belgorod region. And these forces, they moved into Belgorod. The Russian forces, it seems like they've pushed these forces back. But yesterday, these forces managed to take something like 10 Russian. I don't know if these are Russian soldiers or border patrol. Let's just say Russian soldiers. They look like conscripts or border patrol. They managed to take these guys hostage, and they wanted a meeting with the governor or mayor of Belgorod, and he agreed to a meeting. And then these Ukraine forces that have these guys hostage, they didn't go to the meeting, and they put out a video instead. And it was all kinds of craziness. It was really just, I mean, the whole thing seemed like it was a big PR stunt. That's what it looked like to me. More than like a military attack, like a serious military attack, it seemed like this was a big PR stunt. Now, everyone knows that these incursions into Belgorod, their main purpose is to try and distract Russia away from what is happening in Zaporozhye in the south and in Donetsk, and perhaps to move resources over to Belgorod as Ukraine moves towards the big offensive. But it's not working. The Russians are not they're not falling for this, and it seems like they're actually not doing much in Belgorod, and that's kind of a problem as well for the Putin government and for the Russian military. It's good. On the one hand, it's good that they're not taking the bait and moving resources that they have in the battle in Ukraine, moving them to Belgorod. It's good that they're not doing that. But on the flip side, these constant incursions into Belgorod and these media stunts where they are taking prisoners and where the shelling is killing civilians and injuring civilians. This is serious stuff. It seems like these actions from the Ukraine military are creating a problem for the Russian government now and for the Russian military. But I believe that right now the Russian military, they're focused on what's happening in Zaporozhye and Donetsk. And I believe the Russian military, they see the offensive coming. For example, Gerasimov, he was in the area of Zaporozhye as Ukraine was launching this big attack. So for Gerasimov to be there, to me, that signals that the Russian military believes that Ukraine is indeed preparing something very big, or something very big is about to take place or is taking place. That, I think, is a giveaway that Gerasimov was in that region. The Russians knew that something was going to take place, and they were ready for it, which shows that Russia has a pretty good idea. The Russian military, I wouldn't even say pretty good idea. They have a very good idea as to what the Ukraine military is up to. But Gerasimov was in the Zaporozhye region, and it shows that the Russian military is very focused right now on what is taking place there. But you have these issues in Belgorod, and these issues are now getting serious, and people are getting injured, and people are dying, and civilians are in danger. And now you had this hostage situation. You have Kadyrov saying that the Chechens will move in and help protect Belgorod, though the Chechen forces, they're focused on Marinka right now, so I don't think that's possible. And then you have Prigozhin saying that Wagner's going to move in if the Russian military doesn't do anything. Wagner will come in to protect these people, these civilians in Belgorod. And the Russian military has to do something. The Putin government, I think it's time for them to do something in this area. Now, from what I understand, it's very difficult in this Belgorod border to repel these small incursions because you have a lot of forested area and these small forces, which are elite forces. So Russia has border patrol there and conscripts there, but Ukraine, from what I understand, they're sending some elite forces in this direction. And then you have the Polish mercenaries. They can move in and out from the border area fairly easily because of the topography, because of the forested area. So it's not an easy task, but I'm confident that the Russian military will get on top of it. But it is proving to be a headache. It is proving to cause problems for the Russian military, but you can see that they're still absolutely laser focused on dealing with the big counteroffensive, which is probably upsetting for the collective West and for the Zelensky regime, because the purpose of what they're doing in Belgorod is to take away Russia's focus from what is happening in the big counteroffensive. So the distraction is not working, and it will not work, but they have to get a handle on the situation in Belgorod. So that is an update as to everything that happened yesterday. It was an absolutely crazy day yesterday as far as news that was coming in from the military side of things. Now let's talk about Belgium. There's an interesting story. The Belgian government, they're upset, since we're talking about Belgorod, they were upset with the reports that the Ukraine military, or as they like to call them, the anti-Putin Russian far-right forces that they say are making these incursions to Belgorod. The Belgian government is very upset that their weapons were given to these forces. They even said that they never gave approval of weapons from Belgium to go to far-right neo-Nazi forces. That is what the Belgian government stated. And so they want answers from the Zelensky regime. They want to know, how are our weapons that we're giving to you ending up in the hands of these guys who are then attacking Russian territory? I can answer this for the Belgian government. I can answer this question. The Ukraine military is giving them these weapons because they are part of the Ukraine military, and the Ukraine military is giving them your weapons, and they're telling them to move into Belgorod. That's your answer. It's that simple. So I thought that was an interesting bit of news from Belgium. They're trying to play dumb. The government in Belgium is trying to play dumb. How did our weapons end up in the hands of NAZIs? How did this happen? And why are our weapons being used to attack Russia? How is all of this happening? We want answers, Zelensky. We want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Oh, boy. So, Kaja Kallas, the Estonian Prime Minister, she gave a speech the other day. I believe this was her speech at the Shanghai Security Conference. And Kaja Kallas is in the running for NATO Secretary General. And in her speech, she said that Estonia was really not given much of a choice as to whether they were going to join NATO or not, because according to Kaja Kallas, Estonia has a very aggressive neighbor with intentions to take over Estonia, and the only option they had for protection was to join NATO, and NATO is a force for good. It is a peaceful alliance, and it's the alliance that provides Estonia with protection against a very aggressive and belligerent neighbor in Russia.
Living next to an aggressor state left us and several others with no other option but to apply to NATO's security guarantee. We would be living through some really dark times right now if we were not in NATO and EU members.
Maria Zakharova, she responded to this statement from Kallas, and she said to the Prime Minister of Estonia, how peaceful NATO is. You'd better ask Yugoslavia and Libya. The spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry responded to Kaja Kallas' statement that the territorial closeness with Russia, and I quote, leaves Estonia and some other countries no choice but to turn to the alliance for security guarantees. No choice. They had to turn to NATO because Russia is so aggressive, according to Kaja Kallas. And of course, Zakharova, she shuts down Kaja Kallas pretty easily by saying, you know what, maybe you should ask Serbia, Libya, Yugoslavia, how peaceful NATO really is. Maybe you can throw Afghanistan in there and Syria in there as well. And I'm sure there's a long list of countries that NATO has attacked or forces associated with NATO have attacked. A very, very long list of countries indeed. And right now you have NATO involved in this proxy war in Ukraine. But Stoltenberg would argue that NATO is not involved in this conflict in Ukraine. Oh boy, the lies they keep telling us, the lies they keep telling. Let's now segue into clown world territory. And Kaja Kallas, she wants to become NATO Secretary General. That's why she's talking so nicely about NATO. We have Ursula von der Crazy. She wants to be the next NATO Secretary General. We have Chrystia Freeland. She's in the running for NATO Secretary General, and to be quite honest, Freeland would be a very good fit for NATO, if you want my opinion. And you have now another person in the running for the Secretary General of NATO, and that person is the UK's not Boris Johnson, everybody. It is Ben Wallace. Yes, this is a clown world indeed. Rishi Sunak, he is traveling to meet with Biden. I believe he will be in DC on Thursday to meet with Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son. And the reports are that Rishi Sunak will be lobbying Biden to support Ben Wallace for Secretary General of NATO. Ben Wallace. Why not? Yeah, I think Ben Wallace would be perfectly suitable for the position of Secretary General of NATO. Why not? Why not? It is a clown world, everybody. So we have an article from the Express, theexpress.co.uk, and they interviewed a Polish MEP, and this MEP from Poland said that Macron is the master of lies. Macron dubbed master of lies and is accused of plot to give Ukraine territory to Russia, according to the express.co.uk. Now, I've heard a lot of names thrown at Macron. A lot of people have called Macron a lot of things, but I've never heard anyone call Macron the master of lies. He is the master of lies. Let's see here. Exclusive. Speaking to express.co.uk in Warsaw on Friday, a Polish MEP and diplomat lashed out at Emmanuel Macron, branding the French president a liar and questioning France's commitment to helping Ukraine secure victory over Putin's Russia. The master of lies, Emmanuel Macron, according to a Polish MEP. Now, there was a big protest in Poland, a big march. I don't know if it was a protest. I'm not sure what this was, to be quite honest, but it was big. Like 500,000 people showed up for this event in Warsaw, and actually it took place in many cities across all of Poland and Europe as well. And basically, this was some sort of a march, some sort of event against the Law and Justice Party in Poland, the party of Morawiecki and Duda. Take a walk on the wild side, Duda. And they were protesting, I guess they were protesting inflation and the cost of living and corruption and this law that the Law and Justice Party is trying to pass or has passed, where if you are a politician and you had some sort of contact with Russia or Russians, you can't serve in the government for 12 years or something like that. And this law is going to target Tusk, who was actually, I believe, one of the leaders of the European Union. He was, I think he was what Michel is today. That's David Tusk, and he's a pretty prominent politician in Poland. Interesting family background as well. But yeah, so all these people turned out on the streets of Warsaw to protest all of these various things. Now, some people say this was an anti-war protest. Some people say this was anti-Russian protest. Some people say this was pro-Russian protest, anti-globalist protest. I don't know. I saw a lot of EU flags in the videos that I've seen. So I doubt that this was anti-globalist. I doubt this was anti-war. And I doubt this was pro-Russian, because everyone seemed to have had an EU flag. Everyone seemed to be waving an EU flag. So I imagine that this protest was a way to put pressure on the Law and Justice Party, though I'm having a hard time understanding why the globalists or the EU would want to put pressure on Law and Justice. Maybe because of the judicial conflict that they have with Europe, which they still have for the judges and the legal institutions in Poland, and how the Law and Justice doesn't want to give control to the EU of Poland's legal system. So maybe this is a way to put pressure on Law and Justice in that way. But if this was a protest against cost of living, inflation, and corruption, well, the best way to deal with these things is to end the war, to end the conflict in Ukraine, to stop sending money and weapons to the Zelensky regime, to roll back the sanctions if you really want to deal with inflation and cost of living and corruption, because God knows how much money and weapons have been funneled to Ukraine, which has gone missing or has bought Zelensky so many homes. But you really want to get a handle on all this stuff, the best way to do it is to wind things down in Ukraine and get them to the negotiating table. That's the best way to deal with these things, or at least to get a start in dealing with these issues. So it was a huge protest. What the protest was about, I'm not 100%. Maybe it was about a lot of things. But there were definitely a lot of EU flags in the crowd. So my initial conclusion, though I could be completely wrong, is that this was not some sort of anti-EU, pro-Russian, anti-globalist event. It seemed to be more directed at the Law and Justice government and the Law and Justice Party, some of the laws they're trying to pass, and the corruption and the economic issues. So I think I will wrap up the video there. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram, as well as Rockfin, and go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Pick up a hat, maybe. Use the code GOOD DAY. Take care.